Hello, and thank you for joining this IntelliCorp webinar titled Better Quality for Less Effort. My name is Chris Truman. I'm IntelliCorp CTO, and I'll be your host today. To begin, let's look at some of the change activities that cause us to test our SAP environments. The simple fact is, if we were not testing or changing our SAP environments, there wouldn't be a need for us to test, and we wouldn't be concerned with how we deliver better quality for less effort. Next, I'll set out what I think is the case for using intelligent software such as IntelliCorp's Live Compare product to help us achieve those results, better quality for less effort. While I think our products do a lot to help improve the quality of SAP implementations, we certainly don't do it all, and we're certainly not a test execution and test management company. So we've worked to integrate our products with those from HP and IBM, and I'll explain a little bit more about why we do that, what the benefits are, and how the products go about performing that integration. Next, I want to look at a particular problem I see with lights out testing that I call the half-life problem, and how we can use the same intelligent change impact analysis technologies that tell us which transactions we should test to help us maintain the health of those automated tests and maintain the value of them across multiple change cycles. I think many of the issues that we try and address from a quality perspective actually start out life as development issues. And it's actually much cheaper for us to address and fix those problems in development. So I want to show some of the tooling that's available from IntelliCorp that can be used by development teams to improve the quality of their work. Then we'll go through some of the demos and wrap it up with a Q&A session. If we never changed our SAP systems, then there'd be no reason to test them. But the fact is our systems are liquid and are always changing. From major projects like version upgrades, enhancement packs, support packs, to our own custom releases and changes in configuration, code and data. And so naturally we need to test our systems to verify that the changes work as advertised and find that nothing, or prove that nothing has broken as a result. If we reduce the different change activities like enhancement packs, support packs, custom releases and so on down to the questions that need to be answered, we find that there are just two fundamental questions. What's changing? And more importantly, especially from a quality perspective, what's the impact of change? I see three ways of approaching these questions. We can ignore them and hope for the best. We can answer them as we always have done, read whatever documentation is available and test everything, or we can use technology to answer them automatically. Accepting my natural bias, I suggest that technology is the only reasonable way for us to go, especially when we're facing this challenge of how do we deliver better quality for less effort. To help make the case for using intelligent impact analysis software, I've taken just one SAP transaction, its VAO1 or create sales order, and exploded its implementation to 2 levels of depth. In doing this, I've discovered over 19,000 implementation objects. A change to any one of these objects can disrupt the operation of VAO1 in our SAP systems. Now, my perspective on this is that the system is simply too sophisticated for us to analyze by hand. And so, classically, we don't. Traditionally, we've read the documentation and taken this test everything approach. But we can't continue to do things the way we've always done them if we're to satisfy this goal of how do we deliver better quality for less effort. But if we were able to analyze all of this data for all transactions and for all levels of depth, then the resulting information would dramatically change the way we approach testing SAP changes and give us far greater insight into the areas of most at risk, enabling us to drive down this cost and push up the quality. So why do SAP customers choose IntelliCorp's Intelligent Impact Analysis software? First, we can identify what's actually being used. I mean, this is a good first step in helping us reduce the scope of our testing effort. But I'm sure you already realize that this is something that you can do for yourselves, and so would not be reason enough to justify the purchase of a third-party tool. But it's a good start in terms of reducing the scope of our testing effort. Next, the software identifies the transactions, both standard and custom, that are impacted by the change. Again, this change could be an SAP support stack, a custom release, or even emergency correction that's part of our business as usual landscape. The good news is that we're starting to see a reduction, but it's not that big of a deal. A web search for SAP Impact Analysis will reveal a number of technologies claiming to offer this sort of functionality, and this is largely where they all stop. But LiveCompare goes further. LiveCompare works to reduce our test scope to the most at-risk transactions without sacrificing test coverage. And this is where the value really kicks in. The data you're seeing on screen is a blend of 15 customers that used IntelliCorp software on support pack projects. The headline says it all, an 80% reduction in scope when comparing what's used to what's most at risk because of the change. Now, a natural question that many of you are probably thinking right now is, how do we determine what's risk or most at risk? LiveCompare implements two heuristics for computing risk. The first is, how often is the transaction used? LiveCompare will always favor transactions that are used more often over those that aren't used very much. Now, there are exceptions to this. For example, an end-of-period transaction won't have a lot of usage, but it's still very important. And LiveCompare provides a simple way for these transactions to be tagged so that they are properly accounted for in the analysis. The second factor is the relationship to change. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the game 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, it's a game where you can link any actor, film or director back to Kevin Bacon in not more than 7 links. It's actually an example of a general theory of small networks that say that we're all interconnected via small groups. Now, LiveCompare uses this same theory when it comes to picking from many candidate transactions. It always favors the transaction with the strongest relationship to the change. Now, these two factors are blended together to compute the most at risk transactions. IntelliCorp software integrates with third-party test management, test execution products such as those from HP and IBM. It's also possible to integrate other systems, including custom test asset repositories. The reason that we want to do this is twofold. First, having identified the most at-risk transactions, we must now discover the test assets that we'll use to verify the operation of those transactions. As with the analysis of the change, this can be a time-consuming and is largely a manual effort. So LiveCompare automates this by scanning your HP, IBM, or custom test asset repository automatically. A byproduct of this scan is a list of gaps. These are transactions that should be tested. They're certainly at risk, they're impacted, but for which no test asset could be identified. Second, IntelliCorp software will set up a test lab in both HP and IBM containing the available test assets automatically. The benefits of an automated or lights-out test approach are very appealing. Recording a test script is pretty straightforward, and there's almost no cost to playing them back against a system that's been changed. The main challenge with this approach is that the automated test assets are sensitive to changes in the user interface. If we add a screen or flip a field from being optional to mandatory as part of a config change, then the script will fail. Okay, you could argue that this is the point of having the script, is to identify these kinds of regressions. But from what I've seen is that once a script fails, even because of a superficial UI change, then the script is very rarely updated, and if not updated, it's never used again. And we have to fill in the gaps through the use of manual testing. The reason we don't find out about these UI breaks is that we come to run these tests very late on in the test cycle when there's simply no capacity to perform any script maintenance or automated test asset maintenance. This leads to a problem I call the automated test half-life. When we record the scripts, all of them can be played back, so we have a 100% useful or valuable automated regression test library. But as we change the system, the scripts break and we fill in the gaps with manual testing. After several change cycles, our automated test library is unrecognizable. We can use IntelliCorp's LiveCompare software to help maintain the health and value of our automated test assets, because we can use it right at the beginning of the change cycle to discover what UI changes are occurring, whether they're coming from SAP or from the development, our own custom development, and map that back to those automated test assets. So when we change the configuration and flip a field from optional to mandatory, we know that right at the beginning of the change cycle. We identify all of the test assets which operate with that screen, and then we can go in and plan for the necessary maintenance of that script. And that way we eliminate this half-life problem and maintain the health of our automated test assets across many changes. IntelliCorp runs a free SAP benchmarking service. And through this we've collected SAP transaction data from about 620 organizations. This data tells me that on average 30% of an SAP implementation is custom. Now, anyone that's been involved in the software development lifecycle will know that it's always cheaper to fix a problem in development rather than wait for it to show up in production. And so IntelliCorp software includes the tools to help developers improve the quality of their code, once again helping us to drive down cost and push up quality. A useful analysis to help reduce our testing costs and testing effort is to find which customizations are really used. I recently listened to a Gartner presentation given by Andy Kite where he said that we're great at developing and deploying new systems but terrible at retiring stuff we no longer use. Often in the bigger projects this unused stuff gets fixed and tested, and for no good reason other than it's there. IntelliCorp software includes an objective assessment of the complexity of your custom code. Put simply, custom code is expensive. It's hard to change, it's hard to test, and has more production defects. LiveCompare implements an industry standard method for computing the complexity of ABAP code and ranks the code according to SAP recommended metrics. Now, being a bit of a Clint Eastwood fan, I call this the good, the bad, and the ugly. As you can see, our two main developers either write good code or they write ugly code. Behind this chart are all the details that the developers need to pinpoint the individual lines of ABAP code that are adding to the cost of development, testing, and operations support. To use a fashionable term, we can use this analysis to pay off the technical debt we've built up through our customizations. Let's look now at some of the IntelliCorp software in action. Let's start by using LiveCompare to run an intelligent impact analysis for a change to our SAP environment. So before I show the impact analysis, let me briefly introduce you to LiveCompare's way of defining SAP analyses. I hope you all have a fond memory of playing with Lego, and you probably think back to it and think that the idea with Lego is that there are just a few different types of brick, but that they snap together in lots of interesting ways. And how you snap them together determines whether you've got a boat, a spaceship, house, whatever it might be. And the process of assembling these Lego models is very interactive. You snap a few bricks together, you play with it, you change what you want to build, you carry on. So LiveCompare tries to implement a very similar approach, but this time focused on SAP analysis. We have just three types of brick. We've got yellow ones where users input data to control and affect the analysis that LiveCompare performs. We've got blue ones, which is where all the magic happens. These generally fall into the categories of extract some data from SAP. So it might be, for example, the contents of the SAP support pack transports. It would then be to analyze the data. So we want to do that massive cloud impact analysis. And finally we want to report on the results. So just three bricks, but the same Lego concept of they like to snap together in interesting ways. So if we were to look at running an impact analysis for a particular release, then at the top I've got the three pieces of information that I need to give. The first is the set of transports, or if I was running something like Solution Manager Charm, I would enter the project, and then LiveCompare would query Solution Manager to actually look up the transports that are associated with that project. The second is I need to have an SAP system where those transports have been disassembled in the case of a support pack. Most often for a custom release, very likely to be the development system where you've already created the transport. And lastly, I'd like access to the production system so that I can find out what's actually being used. Now, if already that's making you feel a bit sensitive about connecting our product to production, it's okay. There's a variant of this analysis that instead of talking directly to production, reads the usage statistics from a flat file. So you'd log into production, run the report that outputs what's been used and by whom, and Live Compare will then read that in. So that's it. Those 3 inputs are all I need to do in order to set up the Live Compare Intelligent Impact Analysis. Now I can play with it. I click the little green play button and the analysis will start. Now if we're talking about a support stack, 300,000 objects are changing. It could take anything from sort of 8 to 16 hours to run. If we were talking about one small config change, flipping a field from being optional to mandatory, then it might take just a few minutes to run. The results of the impact analysis are formatted as an access report, which starts with some nice high-level summary charts. You've already seen these in the presentation earlier, which illustrate the value of using Live Compare in a change cycle, especially from a testing perspective. We can see what's impacted. We can see it significantly reduced to the recommended or most at risk components. We can get a list of the actual transactions, and these here, the list here has been sorted by usage, but you can already see some of the custom transactions coming in. And we can also get to a significant level of detail which shows us why these objects have been why these objects were impacted and why they're included in the most at risk. So I get to see the underlying sort of the low-level implementation objects that, in this case of a support stack, SAP have changed, and how those changes bubble up to our programs and transactions that we use day in, day out. So Live Compare gives us very much the technical perspective of what it is to introduce change into our SAP environments. And we would use Live Model then to take that up into the world of our business processes. So let's look at the results now in the context of Live Model, or our business process view. Well, I've defined in the Live Capture module of Live Model 3 data sets. One represents the transactions we use. The second represents the results of Live Compare's intelligent impact analysis, and so it's going to tell me which transactions are impacted. And third, I've loaded data through Live Compare from our HP Quality Center repository, and this gives me a view of what's testable. The used indicator is a navy blue ellipse, the impacted indicator is a red circle, and the testable indicator is a green hexagon. So when I zoom out of the model, really what I hope to see is that everything's green, because that means that it's testable. I mean, I guess ideally what I would want to see is that it's just blue, tells me that's used, nothing's impacted, and I've got nothing therefore that I need to test. But in a realistic context, stuff is going to get impacted. We will need to test it. So what we want to see at a high level is a very green model. So I can explore the model and at its highest level with core business processes, and I can also get a decompositional view of that, which will include then all my annotations for the used, impacted and testable. So let's just give me some screen space here. So if we look at the mini-map, this gives us a sort of most zoomed out view. What I can see is that most of the model is green. I mean, there are areas that we're actually not using, and that makes sense. There are business processes that SAP supports that we're not taking advantage of today. But for those areas that we are using, most of it's green. And so that's good news. I mean, that means that where a change is being introduced, there are no gaps in our test coverage. There are some areas, like here in logistics execution, where we're certainly making use of the available transactions. That's what the blue annotation gives us. They're all impacted. That's what the red annotation gives us. And unfortunately, there's no green annotation. So none of this is testable. Now, I should stress that I created this situation for the purposes of this demonstration. But even in real life, it's likely that our regression test library lags behind the way that our SAP systems are being used. And through this combination of live compare for technical implementation analysis and live model for the business process visualization, we get a really nice view of what's what's used, what's impacted, and what's testable. Where are the gaps? Today we've looked at many of the reasons that drive us to test. I've argued that to drive down cost and push up quality, we have to look at using intelligent software that can answer the two fundamental questions of what's changing and what's the impact of change. It's important that we look for solutions that get along with other tools that we've bought to help with quality. We've talked about the half-life problem of lights-out testing, and that by using the same technology that tells us which are the most at-risk transactions, we can keep our automated tests fit and healthy and valuable across many change cycles. Lastly, we've looked at how quality isn't a testing problem. Many of the issues we face in testing can be avoided through better development practices. On the solution side, we've looked at IntelliCorp's Live Compare software, which answers those two fundamental questions automatically, supports integration with third-party test products, and includes the tools needed to help our development teams improve the quality of their code. We've also looked at Live Model, which when fed Live Compare results, provides a business process context for the analysis. A good next step would be for you to schedule a demonstration that focuses on the specific areas of need that you have in your SAP lifecycle. Moving beyond that, we recommend a proof of concept where the software is used with your live SAP systems to prove its value and technical fit for purpose. And finally, we provide various licensing models, everything from enterprise licenses to software as a service models. Both Gartner and Ovum have reviewed our products, talked with our customers, and published the reports of their findings. IntelliCorp software is SAP certified, and IntelliCorp is an SAP software partner. You'll find us on SAP's EcoHub partner portal, where customers have been kind enough to share their thoughts about our products and us as a company. And we're very grateful for the 5-star ratings that each of them have given us. One question was asked during the live webinar. The question was, which IntelliCorp products integrate with HP? In fact, both products that were demonstrated integrate with HP. Live Model populates the requirements and test plan modules, using its business process hierarchy and business process walkthroughs as the source materials. Live Compare reads the test plan, test design, component, and component design entities when it searches for test assets that can be used to test the most at-risk transactions that it identified. Live Compare also creates a test lab for you which contains those identified test assets. If you have any further questions, please do email me and I'll be sure to get right back to you. Thank you for your time and attention today.